You tell me when.
Yeah.
So I'm eating za'atar bread with some sumac on it. Forgive me, Mom. I'm talking with my mouth full. uh, I forgot to ask you this because I know that my own relationship to food has changed dramatically in the past 2 years. I haven't been posting about food, which I always do, because I feel so unbelievably guilty as a forced starvation plan is going on. However, as I was brought some food upstairs right now, I realized that by not posting about Palestinian food, I'm also contributing to another form of erasure. So I did post about Palestinian food. And I wanted to ask you, how has your relationship to food changed over the past 2 years?
So, at different levels. I grew up in a place where social responsibility with food was always present. You cooked one, you shared with people who were your friends, who were your family, but also people who were in difficult situations. When we do an offering, a sacrifice in Palestine, you slaughter a sheep and you give the meat to people in fragile situations. First, you don't eat it; you cook the whole sheep. So that idea of community responsibility is not something that's what changed a lot after those last 2 years of the genocide. The first 2 weeks, I couldn't really cook because I have friends and family now, and I was like, "How dare I cook when the Israeli authorities basically said on the 8th of October or 9th of October, we will not allow food, water, and fuel to Gaza." And then I remember, so last time I was in Gaza was in 1987.
Wow.
And for years after that, my family who was in Gaza would sometimes manage to send out shatta, which is the red fermented chilies, or the dates that were stuffed with almonds and a clove syrup. And then the more the situation became worse, the more it was not allowed to get food out of Gaza, the more. And I had this moment of, but I'm lucky to know a couple of recipes from Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
Should I contribute to erasure by actually not cooking? Should I do, and I think in 1948, Palestinians were so shocked by the Nakba that there are things that dropped, and we didn't realize it until much later. One of them was archives. The Israelis in 48 went after every library. And today, 10, 15, 20 years ago, we started seeing those new historians in Israel who said, wait, guys, the Israeli National Libraries are keeping those books they stole in 48. The same happened with artifacts. Nobody can forget Moshe Dayan occupies the Sinai, goes back. Today in the Israeli National Museum, you have a whole bunch of sarcophagus that were stolen from the Sinai. And I was like, am I going to be part of this? No. I'm going to cook Palestinian food. I'm going to encourage everybody to cook Palestinian food. And I think everybody should. And at a certain moment, it's also an ethical question. Enough posture. Enough. When people tell me, oh, but we feel very bad about doing a fundraiser for Palestine and having a meal with it. And I'm like, yeah, but the rest of the year you are eating. So why if you go to a fundraiser in Toronto or in London or in Paris, you don't want to eat? What is your post about Palestinian food going to do to somebody who's being starved in Gaza? Nothing. But what you're doing to the Palestinian culture, you're keeping it alive. Mm. And I think we've seen sadly, a lot of posturing within, and I don't mean that it comes from a wrong position or a wrong intention. But I think at a certain moment we're smart enough to think, if I say, I'm not going to post food for the next 3 months, will an Israeli chef not go on stealing my food? Of course they will. I'm giving them that empty space.
Yeah.
You know, I learned a very, very deep lesson watching a few of the chefs that were cooking in Gaza. Watching that young girl called Renette
Yes.
post a recipe every day, including until the last day before she left Gaza. And I'm like, wait, if this 12-year-old kid has enough strength to be able to cook in a place where she's being starved forcibly, who am I in Bethlehem or London or Toronto to be like, oh, but I feel bad about cooking? Like at a certain moment, we have to be honest. We are lucky, we're privileged that we are here right here. And we're privileged that Louf's been here for a year saying proudly Palestinian. That is what we should do. That's what everybody should do. I felt often because I've been asked questions. A few months ago, I was in Dubai. A journalist interviewed me. At the end of the interview, looks at me and says, "Do you think I'm Palestinian enough?" And it made me rage because she had been
asked
made
you about
herself
she was
because she had been made to feel by certain people that because
not.
she was not born and brought up in Palestine, she wasn't Palestinian enough. And it made me lose it. I have heard people in different parts of the world say, oh, but to be Palestinian, you have to be this. And I'm like, but I'm not this. I am who I am. I am the grandson of a guy who grew up in Paris, a woman who set up a women's union and a museum on one side, on the other side of grandparents who went to Japan in 1920, ended up living in India, and came back to Palestine. All these people were partly Palestinian.
Yeah.
What's very dangerous with food, with cooking, with posturing, is limiting us to a monolithical reality, which we're not. I cook. This is the tools I have in my hands. You're journalists. Others are activists. Others are politicians. Can we please stick to what we know how to do and do it well?
Stop posturing.
Stop the posturing. You know what? I've said this plenty of times in public. Palestinians are not the panda of WWF. We're not Asterix and the Gaulois. We are like everyone else. So this haram, the poor Palestinians, this is not getting us anywhere. We have to celebrate our culture. We have to celebrate our food. We have to celebrate our tradition of winemaking. We have to celebrate Khalil Sekakini, first Palestinian educator who went off to the Gulf countries and set up the first schools in the Gulf countries. He was Palestinian. We have to celebrate the Lama brothers, first musicians from Bethlehem to put music on Egyptian film, 1906. That is what we need to celebrate because that is being erased. That's being erased by the Zionist narrative, but that's also being somehow replaced by newer narratives that are being fed by political agendas. When we think of the Nakba, sadly today, if you take any 20-year-old kid and ask them about the Nakba, they will tell you the Palestinians were under the olive trees living peacefully and they were thrown out. Do we forget that Nablus was a massive trading city? Do we forget that Akka, Haifa, and Jaffa were massive trading cities? Do we forget that Jerusalem had the most diverse population in the world? Yeah, today you celebrate here in Toronto multiculturalism. 2,000 years ago, it was Jerusalem. There were pilgrims, but the three monotheistic religions that went there and settled there. So you had African Malian Muslims and Ethiopian Christians and Jews from Bratislava, and there's an Indian Zawiya, and there's a Gypsy Zawiya where people, and there's a Naqshbandi Zawiya, and there's a Bukhari Zawiya. Farah, familiar?
Yeah.
I mean, come on, who had this? And limiting us to this, limiting us to the Palestinian farmer under the olive tree, limiting us to Palestinians are miserable and they need our compassion. We don't need anybody's compassion. You know, the first time I came to Toronto, when Nicole invited me to come and see Toronto and think of Louf, I was also lucky to participate in the Toronto Palestinian Film Festival, in the talk. And I was sent the link. I read the first line where it said, unapologetically Palestinian. I didn't read the rest. I called Nicole, I'm like, tell them I'm coming.
We're in. Yeah.
Because why should I apologize for it? Palestinians in the West Bank are eating, they're suffering. Their lands are being confiscated. The settlement projects have grown. The land confiscation is happening every day. Israel is clearly saying we're going to annex the West Bank, which I find very strange because they've actually de facto more or less annexed the West Bank. But farmers are still planting. I was early on the phone with some of the winemakers I work with, and they've picked their grapes. They haven't had a great year. Some of the places have been very challenging, where settlers have attacked people, but they're still there. And I don't think, imagine if we would tell people in the West Bank, in Gaza, stop eating. You know, I'll tell you this story that happened early on, just after the beginning of the genocide. A friend of mine got displaced from where he lives to the south of Gaza, and then south of Gaza to Rafah. And then one day he posts on Instagram himself having a bottle of Schweppes.
Yeah.
And some activists across the world have a go at him. But we're boycotting Schweppes. And he reaches out to me, he's like, can you tell these people I have not had a drop of drink for 2 days. That's the only thing I found today, and I drank. And I'm like, you know what? If this guy would find an Israeli water made in a settlement, what is the choice? Him dying of thirst or drinking? So you want to boycott in places where you have a privilege to boycott. It's like when we're told, as Palestinians in the West Bank, or in East Jerusalem, or in 48, or in Gaza, don't buy Israeli electricity. And it's like, but all of our electric grid...
live in the dark.
Exactly. So at a certain moment, we have to be real in the reality on the ground. And with food, it changed my relationship definitely. We've been doing supper clubs, raising money for Gaza for the last 2 years. It's always very strange. Again,
You know, like when you're talking, I just kept hearing Palestinians aren't what you need them to be,
no,
what you want them to be.
we're not. We will not be what the world wants us. Neither a docile people that will accept anything imposed on us, nor heroes. Because, you know, I think as a people, we've been cursed with heroes for too long. And the idea of having a hero every cycle, and if you look at the...
I was coming on your ground, so pity the news.
Exactly. We are, so a very long time ago, somebody I know, actually my mother, not somebody,
Yeah.
told Mahmoud Darwish, who's more resistant? The lady who brought up her kids in the West Bank, or a poet in Paris? And Mahmoud didn't have an answer.
Yeah.
But it's both.
Yes.
It's both.
That's the answer.
It's the guy who's still in Gaza City right now, who still manages to grow molokhia in a water bottle and manages to feed his family. It is the person in Toronto who's making Nabulsi cheese in Mississauga. It is you cooking Palestinian food. And like, I don't think that this idea of putting measures on who's more resistant, who's more, it's like, who cares? But also, we were, for a long time, we had people like with labels. To your earlier question about Eastern Mediterranean, which led us to actually say some Palestinians didn't even say that their restaurants were Palestinian. It's because a label was put on being Palestinian. Think of the PLO, Palestine Liberation. In the 60s, most of the world labeled it as terrorist. In the 90s, most of the world labeled it as a partner for peace. Look at Indian liberation movement.
Or
Gandhi,
Sinn Féin.
Patel,
Sinn Féin.
or Sinn Féin, or,
Mandela.
Mandela, Stephen Biko.
Yep.
Like, at a certain moment, we don't need to tell people this is where. It's a bit like when people ask me, do you adapt your food to people's palates? No, I don't. I adapt my food to the reality of a terroir I'm cooking in. But I don't think. So we did a lamb filet with a basturma ghee on top, and it's pretty spicy.
Yes.
Very rich in spices. And I just tasted it now, and it made me think of this, and I was like, yeah, how many people will taste this and be like, oh, he's not made any concessions about flavor. He didn't assume that, Canadians won't like that spiciness. That is what the dish is about. I'm not going to make it unique, because I think there's enough unique politics. There's enough unique posturing. If you're going to wear a keffiyeh and march down the street and get offended if I use the keffiyeh to dry water, because it happened to me in Toronto when my book came out. I was at a bookstore. I had my keffiyeh around my neck. I spilled some water, so I took my keffiyeh and I dried the water. And the person waiting for me to sign the book looked very offended. And I looked at that person and I said, I'm sorry, what? He said, no, but you don't realize the symbolism. No, I know. I grew up with me using a keffiyeh to collect olives in it. Like, it's a scarf which we use daily. Yes, it has a symbolic. Yes, it has, but it's a daily scarf. So my keffiyeh is somebody's scarf here.
Yeah.
It's not some holy, Palestine is the land of holy, somehow in a lot of things.
Everything becomes sacred.
But not everything should be sacred. An olive is sacred. But how I use olive oil shouldn't be sacred. It should be celebrating olive oil. I understand for certain people there's a journey of dispossession. There's a journey of distance. A lot of people tell me, but it must be so difficult living in Bethlehem. Yes, it is. It's very challenging to be living behind a 12-meter wall. It's very challenging to have movement, controlled. It's very challenging not to have running water in summer. All the results of occupation. But I'm privileged to be living in Bethlehem. Bethlehem's not a gimmick. That separation wall, a lot of artists drew on a separation wall. And it makes me rage because I think it's fetishizing occupation. It's like in South Africa when people were doing tours of Soweto in a 4x4 that was armored. I feel the same in Bethlehem when I see a bunch of tourists coming in and painting on the wall. It's like, guys, no. Like, that ugly wall has to go. So with occupation, we have to understand the elements of life, food, agriculture, drink, celebrations, traditions. This is what we need to preserve. Archives, like our rich history. I'm not a practicing person, but I find religious rituals fascinating because I love it when people are shocked. Oh, but Christian Arabs say Allah.
Maltese,
and it's like, yeah,
that's their word, the Maltese.
Because, of course, the Maltese have a fascinating language. First time I heard Maltese.
My partner is Maltese.
Oh.
Yes.
So you know what timpana is?
Yes, I do, yeah.
Okay, it took me a while to understand that layering of Makruba. But when Maltese speak,
She understands a lot of Arabic.
Arabic, Italian, French mixed together. I remember being in Valletta for an event and hearing people speak Maltese. And I was like, this is so familiar. This is so but when you get those rituals, let's take Malta as an example. Malta is very Christian.
Yes.
They have a history.
Extremely Catholic.
Extremely. And they use those words. We use them. But when somebody in the West, it's like, wait, but there are Christians there? Like, 2,000 years ago, somebody was born in Bethlehem, 800 meters away from where I live.
Jay.
Maybe, you should remember where that Judeo-Christian Muslim culture comes from. When I'm told by people from Muslim backgrounds in places like Toronto, oh, but you shouldn't be selling alcohol. And I'm like, guys, do you know who invented distilled alcohol? A guy called Jabir bin Hayyan in Baghdad. He was a mathematician, an alchemist, and a very devout Muslim. He was trying to invent a machine to create kahal. That's why it's called alcohol.
Oh, the
Yes.
black.
The black makeup to
Yes,
reflect
my
the
mom
sun.
would wear that, but
But
the word
initially,
is still the same.
kahal.
Yes.
Initially, kahal was worn by men and women in places where there was a lot of sun to reflect the sun. So he was trying to invent this, and it didn't really work out. So he ended up with this contraption. Tried putting things in it, and one of the things he put was aniseed, because at the time they were already using extracts, and that distillation created a very intense oil of aniseed, and then he dumped some grapes in it, and it created arak.
Ada. Yeah.
And he was very angry at himself because he was a practitioner, so he didn't
Yeah.
drink. And he was like, wait, I just invented a machine to make fermented alcohol into something that's even more potent. But at the time, one of the favorite poets of the port was somebody called Abu Nawaz, who was living a nice life. The guy was enjoying opiates, alcohol, and he tried it, and he loved it. And he wrote a poem about it, where he describes arak as a liquid as transparent as waiting water that creates the state of euphoria. That's how today, if in Canada you guys make whiskey, it's thanks to a Muslim scholar in Baghdad 1,000 years ago. So that is where I think, again, that how I deal with food today, how I think of, we need to reach out beyond what people want us to.
Mhm.
We're not limited to one store. We are, there's 15 million Palestinians across the world.
Mhm.
We're 15 million journeys, 15 million stories. And Malta. Do you know that the Order of Malta is very present in Palestine?
No, I didn't.
And they are one arm of the Catholic Church that including in Gaza, has been giving out aid.
Wow.
So at a certain moment, we have to stop thinking that Palestinians are this. Because
and
we're not.
confined to this.
Of course.
Because they know, yeah.
When people are in solidarity with Palestine, do me a favor, read up about this. Because we can only defy those narratives that are being imposed on us when we know. When we know, ask Palestinians, listen to Palestinians. Don't think that waving a Palestinian flag and wearing a keffiyeh is the summum. That's the start. And the summum is a million times higher. You know, when you see, I was in London recently, and there was this big event happening at Wembley, which was a concert,
Oh yes, the concert.
Together for Palestine.
Brian Eno.
Brian Eno and Francesca Albanese and everybody
My girl
else.
crush.
Francesca. So Francesca's a good friend of mine. And, you know, everybody. Eliana and
Yeah.
Satlevon and Malak Matar, of course, the fantastic artist from Gaza. I mean, I can't name all of them. 150 stars. But I wish everybody who was an activist would look at the list of people who were participating, and specifically the Palestinians, because the Palestinians that were there was at a certain moment. So I was catering to that.
No.
And on the first day, I ran into somebody I knew when we were kids in Palestine that I hadn't seen for 20 years.
Wow.
And somebody else I know more was there, and we stopped there, and I look at them like, you know what, this is fantastic. One of them is a Palestinian from the diaspora. One of them is a Palestinian from Jerusalem. One of them is a Palestinian from Gaza. I am from Bethlehem. There was a Palestinian from Haifa. We all were together in that instant, that spot. And each one of us came from a very different craft.
Yeah.
There was a singer, there was an actor, there was a visual artist, there was a cook. We're all together. And I was like, you know what? I wish people would see this because they would understand. And then there was one person missing into this mix, a fantastic Palestinian DJ, Sama Abdul Hadi.
Oh, I
And
love
Sama
her.
shows up,
Oh my God,
and I'm
I
like,
love
now the
Sama.
image is complete.
That's it. Yeah. She's amazing.
Because all of that mix is who we are.
We are everything.
We are everything. We are a DJ that is world-renowned doing electro music, and we are Adnan Shubran and the Trio Shubran doing oud music with their own style, and we are Amir, who's a fantastic actor, and we are Malak Matar, and we are Eliana, who's Chilean, and we are Sandra, who's Palestinian from Gaza. We are all of this.
And we are Fadi.
And we're Fadi, and we are Samira, and we are, people, and that's with food. You asked me earlier about Laban Jamil. Laban Jamil is used in the center and south of France. If you go north, from Jerusalem north, most people will never cook with Laban Jamil.
Why?
Because
Is it
they
thought of as
use-
being peasant or
It's being southern.
southern?
And southern because nomadic, because we have more desert in this house.
Yes.
They had the luxury to have
A
green
fridge.
pasture. No,
Oh, okay.
before that, green pastures.
Right.
So they had fresh milk and yogurt every day. So the same recipes are cooked with fresh yogurt, not fermented yogurt. And then you go to Gaza. Gaza never really had much dairy. So they have the same version of most of those dishes, but they would use lamb broth, not yogurt instead.
Right.
So that is, again, the richness of it. It's not, and I just wish
The
people
richness
would
of the
understand.
terroir is it's a
Of course.
reflection of the people.
course.
Yeah.
Of course. And I wish people could understand this. And you can have, so tahiniya. Tahiniya is sesame.
That's what we all, yeah, here, that's, yeah.
And then in Nablus, they do very good tahiniya with sesame, but they also do a black tahiniya with nigella seeds.
That's my food.
In Gaza, they do a red tahiniya with sesame that's half roasted. So it gets a red color. If I would give my mother red tahiniya from Gaza, she doesn't know what she is. Because that's not part of her daily cooking.
Yeah.
She may come up with a genius idea, but she wouldn't know what to do with it. If I ask somebody in Gaza to cook with Laban Jamil, they don't know what to do. And it's so forth. Those richnesses are what you will find in the diaspora. And that's something which is important for people in the diaspora to also understand. Don't try doing what you were told was authentic. Do what your parents have told you in terms of food. Because your parents reflect an area, a region, a moment in the history of housing. And that's important to me, darling. Thank you.